From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We go live to the British Parliament, where the members are debating on the credibility of Prime Minister Theresa May. Let's listen to what they're saying.
The longest run in the G7. That's a balanced approach to the economy. That's Conservatives delivering for the people of this country.
Sir Patrick McLaughlin.
Can I ask my right honourable friend to take her mind back to September '97, when a referendum was held in Wales? The result of that referendum was 50.3% in favour of an assembly and 49.7% against, on a turnout of 50%. Nobody questioned whether we should accept the referendum. Does that hold any future reference for us?
Can I thank my right honourable friend? He's made a very important point, and he's made a very important point about the principle that was accepted at that time, which was, however small the margin in the vote, it was the overall result of the vote that should be accepted and acted on.
Jill Furness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I hosted an event to raise money for Radio Hallam FM's Mission Christmas, a charity doing fantastic
vote that we are looking at and we're listening is a vote of no confidence that was called by the members of Theresa May's Conservative Party. May is, as we see, she's struggling as she faces criticism from the opposition party leaders. He asked Jeremy Corbyn before her time speaking. He asked if the Brexit plan was damaging the lives of the British people. MPs are frustrated with May's Brexit negotiations and disapprove her approach.
Can I first of all, and obviously...
So May is speaking at the House of Commons at the moment. 48 members of Parliament from her party have challenged her leadership, triggering this vote of no confidence. A ballot will be held between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. local time, and votes will be counted immediately. Potential candidates to replace her include the former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, Home Secretary Sajid Javid, and Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, among others. Here's how she reacted after the news broke out and before today's vote.
Sir Graham Brady has confirmed that he has received 48 letters from Conservative MPs, so there will now be a vote of confidence in my leadership of the Conservative Party. I will contest that vote with everything I've got.
And we'll go back with those live images when we have more, but let's look at how Prime Minister May was due to travel to Dublin this afternoon to continue meeting with other EU leaders, but will now remain in London. She made an appeal yesterday against a change in leadership in the Brexit negotiations.
Placed by the 21st of January legal deadline, so a leadership election risks handing control of the Brexit negotiations to opposition MPs in Parliament. The new leader wouldn't have time to renegotiate a withdrawal agreement and get the legislation through Parliament by the 29th of March, so one of their first acts would have to be extending or rescinding Article 50, delaying or even stopping Brexit, when people want us to get on with it.
And let's go with other news. Bolivian President Evo Morales has condemned a fire set by protesters to an electoral court in the department of Santa Cruz. Supporters of the far right and students from the University of Gabriel René Moreno were protesting against Morales and his plans to run for re-election. They were seen violently shaking fences and scrambling through the court building. Flames could be seen inside the court building and outside, thrown by protesters. According to government, these events compared to 2008, when right-wing groups attempted a coup against President Morales. The Vice Minister of Interior, José Luis Quiroga, also denounced the violence and said they were an attack on democracy.
We need to stop these acts of violence. That's what the police has been ordered to do, and to begin investigations. This group of delinquents receiving orders by the political opposition needs to be identified. This was a planned action and covered as false peaceful actions. But their real plan is to create violence, take over institutions, and destroy democracy in Bolivia.
Now to Ecuador, where former Vice President Jorge Glass has brought his hunger strike to an end after 52 days. Glass said he held his hunger strike to demand his release and reject a political persecution against him. According to a letter penned by Glass and published on social media, he ended the hunger strike at the request of friends and families. He also thanked his supporters.
Son incertidumbres, no tengo esa respuesta.
An economist and radio broadcaster Otto Sonnenholzner has been appointed as new vice president of Ecuador. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has more details.
With 94 votes in favor and 27 votes against, the National Assembly elected economist and radio broadcaster Otto Sonnenholzner as the new vice president of Ecuador. Assembly member Alberto Arias, representative of the province of Guayas and Alianza País party, was in charge of announcing the motion's approval. Journalist and director of the Triángulo Foundation, Nancy Vasco, and economist and education expert, Agustín Albán, were also on Moreno's list of proposals.
I thank the Assembly members for ratifying the will of our President. I hope that this is a sign of us being able to go forward together in everyone's interests. I also thank the social, business and political leaders who supported me unconditionally. I'm honored to share this platform with Nancy Vasco and Agustín Albán.
Before starting the plenary session, the Citizen Revolution movement expressed their rejection of the list proposed by President Moreno, as well as the selection process for the candidates. They asked that the candidates and the new vice president be vetted to ensure they meet the requirements for the post.
We will ask for verification of legal requirements needed. Remember that it was the people who established that public officials must not be financed by entities or have money in tax havens. We want to know if every requirement has been fulfilled, if they have contracts with the government, or if these contracts are over. We don't have that information.
New Vice President Otto Sonnenholzner was accused of being part of the company Gallet Enterprises, located in Panama. According to a statement made by the Minister of the Interior, Maria Paula Romo, the new Vice President has no more shares in the company and is not its owner. After a 2017 referendum ordered by Moreno, it is forbidden for people with properties or money in tax havens to work in the public sector. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
More stories coming up. We'll be back.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Venezuelan and Russian air forces held joint military drills on Tuesday despite attacks from the U.S. government. 2 heavy bomber aircrafts carried out flight exercises from the Maiquetía Simón Bolívar International Airport in Caracas. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the flights were carried out in strict accordance with international airspace use regulations. The Tu-160 military planes arrived in the country earlier this week. And on Tuesday, the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry rejected statements by United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on this military cooperation. He said that the reactions of Pompeo are not just disrespectful but cynical. The U.S. has at least 800 military bases in 70 countries. Today, 75 of the 107 U.S. programs for security cooperation operate in Latin America. Finally, he added, if they are so concerned about wasteful spending, they should review their immense and unjustified military budget of more than $674 million for 2019. I'm sure the 50 million people without access to public health in the U.S. can suggest fairer destinations for those funds. A court in Argentina has handed down prison sentences to 2 former executives of the Ford company for their part in complicity with the military dictatorship. Our correspondent Sabrina Roth has more.
This is indeed an historic day in Argentina. A court has condemned former managers of the Ford multinational company for crimes against humanity. This is the first verdict of its kind, not only for collaboration with the dictatorship, but for direct involvement by the businessmen in these crimes. The case dealt with events 42 years ago, when 24 workers were kidnapped and tortured. Most of them were shop stewards at the Ford factory at General Pacheco. All this was proven during the hearings in the case, which began in December 2017. The Ford manager not only handed over the names of the workers, but their files with photos and other personal details. They let the security forces into the factory and supplied transportation to take the arrested workers away. The court decided unanimously that the sentences should be served in common prisons. Pedro Mueller, the former head of production at Ford, was sentenced to 10 years in prison, while Hector Sevilla, the former head of security at the factory, received 12 years, while the army officer Santiago Riberos got 15 years.
That was Sabrina Roth from Buenos Aires. And dozens of Argentine actresses have shown support for actress Thelma Fardín, who accuses an actor of raping her in 2009 when she was 16 years old. Fardín says she was raped by actor Juan D'Artes during a tour of a successful children's program. Fellow Argentine actresses held a conference in Buenos Aires to speak against sexual harassment in the entertainment industry, particularly in South American countries.
It was traumatic, and it was very difficult to speak at that moment. I did only with 2 friends who were 17 years old.
We are with her. There is a criminal complaint. This is a very strong case, and we, as a collective, are with her, as we would also be with someone who works in any other field.
Colombia's President Iván Duque has approved a proposal to the law that allows former FARC members to be arrested again. Under the proposal, former combatants can be arrested even if they signed the peace agreement, which was done in 2016. FARC former combatants are now part of a political party who have participated in elections and have taken seats in Congress. Meanwhile, Colombia's special jurisdiction for peace says it won't review the extradition requests against FARC leaders since it doesn't follow legal requirements. Former combatants such as Jesus Santrich have demanded that they not be extradited. Several members have not presented themselves to the special court, which was part of the peace agreement, on fears of persecution. They say there are no guarantees that human rights will be respected with the resurgence of more paramilitary groups. The National Coordinator of Coca, Poppy, and Marijuana Cultivation has denounced the Colombian President Iván Duque as failing to meet with them to discuss plans regarding the replacement of these crops. Members of the COCAM protested since they say the Colombian government has had no intention of working together. Since the start of the national program for the replacement of illicit crops in 2017, 46 leaders have been assassinated and 1 has been disappeared. Members of the organization also denounced Colombian military's role.
The government, as a response to the denouncements we've made, has deployed more soldiers and an iron fist. But this iron fist hasn't prevented the continued killing of the leaders in these territories. What's more, the massacres have increased. And what we're seeing is that the government isn't pursuing nor combating armed paramilitaries, who are positioning themselves here since the FARC left.
Since the massacre in Tumaco, they haven't deployed anyone, haven't brought any charges. They have done absolutely nothing against the officials and those related to the anti-narco-trafficking police there.
Now to Mexico, where around 100 migrants marched to the U.S. consulate in Tijuana on Tuesday to deliver a petition requesting their asylum claims be processed faster. Migrants holding flags of their native countries in Latin America walked along a highway to get to the consulate. They were stopped outside by Mexican police.
We're only asking that they accelerate the process, that more people are able to pass through each day. That's all we're asking, and that, for us to apply for asylum, the same people from the government evaluate us and decide who really gets political asylum.
And the Mexican government has announced that it will provide thousands of humanitarian and working visas to Central American migrants. The government has already handed out 600 visas to members of the migrant caravan at the U.S. border. According to the United Nations, a total of 7,000 migrants have left their countries in large groups over the last few months.
We have proceeded with a strategy, which is underway and will advance significantly, to grant visitor cards for humanitarian reasons to this entire group. By doing this, their situation in Mexico is normalized and guaranteed, and their routes and expectations widen.
An explosion caused by fireworks in the central Mexican state of Querétaro has left at least 6 people dead and scores of others injured. According to the state's civil defense agency, the accident occurred when fireworks that were being stockpiled for a local celebration at a chapel exploded as they were not properly secured. In 2016, chain reaction explosions tore through an open-air fireworks market outside Mexico City, killing 42.
First, we call on the solidarity of the hospital to not profit from the injured people and hope they will waive the unnecessary expenses. We're willing to pay what is fair. On the other hand, although fireworks are part of the traditions and costumes, it will be more regulated. We cannot allow any organization to use excess amount of fireworks for their own will.
The U.S. Congress has passed legislation that seeks to impose sanctions against the government of Nicaragua, and that will pass on to President Donald Trump for approval. If signed, the NICA Act, short for the Nicaraguan Investment and Conditionality Act, will require U.S. approval for loans to the government of Daniel Ortega from international financial institutions. The bill was approved by Congress, and now Trump has 10 days to sign it. Intellectuals and social leaders from more than 50 countries will take part in the 4th International Conference for World Balance in Cuba's capital, Havana. They will be discussing the importance of intercultural dialogue, diversity in arts, the role and challenges of social movements, and the struggle for peace. The conference is reported to be the largest global forum on plural thought, where ways of promoting peace will be discussed. It will take place on January 28th until the 31st. We're taking one last break, but stay with us.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur. An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. 7 mass graves containing more than 100 bodies have been discovered in Syria, in an area which was previously controlled by the Islamic State group. The graves are seen, and they were found by organizations in the country, the Red Crescent and the Syrian civil defense personnel. The bodies reportedly indicate that the victims had been subjected to torture and ill treatment before they were executed. Now to France, where Interior Minister Christophe Castaner announced that the man responsible for Tuesday's terrorist attack in Strasbourg is well known by security forces. He said the man previously served prison sentences in France and Germany for common offenses. He added that the attacker had been injured during the attack and an extensive manhunt was already on the way, involving hundreds of security agents. At least 4 people have been killed and 12 injured in a shooting at a Christmas market.
Troops from the Sentinel Force used their weapons to try and intercept the attacker. Between 2020 and 21 hours, he confronted our security forces 2 times. Each time shooting was involved. Counter-terrorism prosecutors are now working on the case. A manhunt is underway to arrest the attacker. It is a man very well known for many common law offenses for which he has already been convicted here and in Germany, and for which he has already served his sentences. 350 people have been mobilized on the field to try to stop his escape.
This attack came a few hours after French President Emmanuel Macron declared a state of emergency in an attempt to end the nationwide protests. These protests, which are now in the 4th week, have put President Macron's government under pressure. Over the weekend, thousands of police officers were deployed to clamp down on protesters who took to the streets against Macron's economic and education policies. On Tuesday, a Canadian court granted the release on bail of Huawei's CFO, Meng Wanzhou, who was arrested in Canada and is facing extradition to the United States. Meng will be subject to electronic monitoring and has to surrender her passport as a condition. The extradition process is scheduled to begin on February 6 and could take months if appeals are made in the case. China's foreign ministry has warned Canada over what they called grave consequences over Meng's arrest and have demanded her release.
The detention of Meng Wanzhou from the very beginning, it is a wrong action. We have made our position clear to the Canadian and US governments. They should immediately correct their mistakes and release her.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry has announced that detained Canadian Michael Kovrig was working for an illegal organization. The ministry said the NGO which Kovrig works for, the International Crisis Group, has been operating illegally in the country. Kovrig was detained by Chinese security officials in Beijing on Monday. All non-governmental organizations operating in China are required to be registered.
Also, if the ICG is saying that this person, the person you're referring to, is undertaking certain activities for them, then I can remind you, or remind this organization through you, that as far as I understand, ICG is not registered in China. If it's not registered and its workers are in China undertaking activities, then that's already outside of and breaking the law, revised just last year on the management of overseas non-governmental organizations operating in China.
North and South Korea have removed guard posts which have existed for more than 5 decades on both sides of the demilitarized zone. This move is being celebrated as another positive step along the way towards normalized relations between the 2 Koreas. The destroying of the guard posts is one of the steps that were agreed on during a meeting by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and his South Korean counterpart Moon Jae-in in September. A 4-year-old Palestinian child has died after being injured by Israeli gunfire at the Gaza border. According to local reports, the child was shot in the eye by an Israeli sniper during Friday's protests and succumbed to his injuries. Earlier this week, a Palestinian man was shot by Israeli forces on suspicion of car ramming. Since the Great March of Return started on May 15, at least 195 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli troops. And before we end, we remember that Tuesday marked the day in 1964 when Ernesto Che Guevara gave an historic speech at the General Assembly of the United Nations as a representative of Cuba.
Now history will have to tell the tale of the poorest, the exploited, and the disgraced from Latin America. who have decided to write their own stories forever. This wave of justice and rights won't stop. It will grow more every day, because the wave is made up by the majority, who accumulate richness through their work, those who create value and make the wheels of history move. Now they are waking up from their long and brutalizing dream to which they had been submitted. This great humanity has said enough and started to walk forward. And its giant's march will not stop until true independence, for which many have already died without reason. Now, those who die will die like Cubans, like those on Huron Beach. They will die for their truth and their irrenounceable independence.
And that brings us to the end of this news brief. For this and other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're on social media as well, so go ahead and follow us. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.